Let's welcome our speakers. Diana, would you like to go first and introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everyone. I'm Diana Wolosin. I am from Colombia to America around 8 years ago. I have been in the industry around 8 years ago and in design system around 5 years ago. I am Friends of Figma San Diego leader and also the creator of Design System Ignition, currently working at Indeed as a senior design system.
Love it. Gonzalo, I'm passing the mic to you.
Hi, I'm Gonzalo Vasquez. I'm senior product designer in the CDS team, a company called Zalando. This is a German company, so only if you are in Europe, you will maybe have heard about it. And yeah, I've been part of the design system team there for the last 4 years. We are a team of around 15 people. I think Patricia, also a member of the Zalando team, correctly was in some previous sessions of this. I'm originally from Chile and I've been in Dublin, Ireland for the last 7 years. But yeah, happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Love it. Gonzalo, I believe you've been a part of the config last year, right? Where you talked about the design tokens.
Yeah, 2024. Yeah, last one. Previous to the fun one that we had this year.
Yeah. Love it. Jeff, would you like to share your story?
Hello, everybody. I'm Jeff Pelletier. I'm a design technologist or front-end hybrid. Been working on design systems for about 6 years. I'm currently with Aperture, so been in fintech previously with Bill, and then started at Aperture a few years ago. I'm in the New England in the Northeast in the United States, but I lived in Brazil for a few years. So thank you so much for inviting me to be here today.
Love it. Alberto, I'm passing the mic to you.
Hi everyone, I'm Alberto. I work currently as a design system principal for a company called Aviv Group, also based in Europe. It's basically a holding of multiple real estate marketplaces here in Europe, predominantly in France, Belgium, and Germany. Before that, I worked at Prezi, which is more familiar for the people in the States, as a design system manager. And before that, I worked for a few companies in the Netherlands where I lived for 7 years. But I'm now based back in Spain, where I'm originally from. Happy to be
Love it,
here.
love it.
Currently, very hot. Is summer hot in the middle of the country? We
Love
like.
it. Great. And my name is Faris Abidov. I'm going to host the session today. So thank you very much for joining. Let's get started. The goal for this session is to inspect and reflect on how base design system is used within the Uber products to learn best practices and grow together. So a quick overview here, right? We have a speakers only board that is secret and we will be pulling some information from there from time to time. Today we're going to dive deeper into the Uber products. As you can see here, I already created a quick overview of all the main pages that they have. So within our exploration, as you can see here, we explored all the main pages. Let me just quickly open up the Uber website and see what kind of pages do we have here. So we went through the main Uber website in order to understand what kind of components do they use. And also we went to the main place where there is information about the whole experience around booking car and finding the rental cars and other things as well. Same applies for all the promos or choose a car, choose a ride. Also, we went through the Uber Eats. We didn't dive deeper into Uber Eats as Uber website, but we just highlighted here a couple main pages that they have. Speaking about other things, they have other pages like riders.uber.com, account.uber.com, where you will able to see all your profile user account. And the same applies for the wallet, where you will able to see all the information related to your Uber wallet directly on their product, on their website. So we went through that and we prepared all those screenshots. And today, as I mentioned, we are going to dive deeper into specific component families and see how they are being used within the product. Before diving into components, let's take a look into the ways how they document everything. There are so many interesting things that we can learn from base design system. So we put some interesting notes here. I'm sure it will spark some ideas on your side. Jeff, would you like to go first and share some of the things that you really like about the way how Uber base design system is documenting their design system?
Sure. So, I mean, first, right off the bat, that homepage, that four up kind of, it is kind of a clue that this is a zero height driven site. It's clearly heavily customized, but they are using zero height under the hood. I really liked a lot of emphasis on video. So this is something that Dan Mall talks quite a bit about, and he uses the Audi style guide as an example where you take actual implementation or usage of your design system assets and show them in a product and how teams are actually using them. And so I think Base is definitely taking a note there. There's video, all over this documentation site in individual components, kind of explaining the design thinking behind them, all the way to like screencasts of like how to onboard. And it just seems like they invested quite a bit in video and trying to hold people's hands as they start using things. That can be a little bit of a double-edged sword, right? Like I was watching some of the videos and I was thinking, oh man, this is like a snapshot in time. How much maintenance overhead is this to maintain videos? But I guess if you're only doing it on like the high level design thinking behind components, perhaps that doesn't change as much as some of the other things over time.
Love it. Diana, do you have any interesting things that you found so far within the base documentation that you would like to save for yourself and start implementing with your teams?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I second what Jeff just said. Truly, the decision of having it in zero height, I'm wondering if it was a strategic decision on their end or it was more like a practical decision because they already had a lot there and it was going to be a huge refactor work to redo it in their own design system management tool. So that's very interesting. The huge design systems that I have seen utilize their own design system management tool. But on the other hand, it's probably a strategic decision because they probably thought we are going to invest in optimizing, improving our design system, the actual construction of our design system management tool. So I thought that that was very interesting. In addition to the videos, they also have a lot of, I don't know if you guys saw that, but I found that what really cares about intuitive documentation and the digestible for the users to truly understand. So I really like that. But again, I can imagine if they change a principle, if they have to go through all the work to update the videos, that is probably a lot of work for them. Another thing that I noticed and caught my attention was how many components they have across the page to capture feedback. I thought that was very interesting because usually my company, how we do it is we get Jira tickets in case we need to make any or anything like that. So we funnel that, but there is a specific section in our documentation that is for submitting tickets. It's not like this, they have submit your feedback in every single space of the documentation. And I really appreciated that. And in addition to that, the content description, the content breakdown, just remarkable work. I have been trying to do something similar for the email design system content wise, and it takes so many moving parts. So the fact that they achieve that shows that they are very strategic in their approach.
Love it. And I totally agree. And thank you for sharing your points here. Gonzalo, you mentioned that you really like their drop the base section video tutorials. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I think besides was mentioned, one thing that caught my attention was this resource and tools page. Like it's a whole page apparently dedicated to, yeah, how to learn the systems. And I think there's a lot of pages locked, but there's some quick video tutorials that I think is related with this thing that we're talking about, the videos that is really nice to have. We always have the same conversation on our team, like, should we just make a video of this thing and then point out to people to review the video instead of replying the same thing all over again? But of course, maintaining this thing is hard. But there's also a screencast sections, which what I understood is also they recorded themselves showing or doing deep dive around some stuff. So in that case, that kind of video can be a bit more relaxed in a way, but it's valuable material that you should record and reuse as they're doing this page. So I really like the approach on their way to tackle not just the documentation of the system, but also how to use it and learn concepts and patterns that this size of system, you need to have some guidance to understand what's going on. Otherwise, it's just too much. There's a full page of foundations, another full page of components, then you have another of web and such. So it's nice to see this approach on their side.
Love it. Alberto, you had some thoughts around the content design. Would you like to share here?
Yeah, well, one of the things that stood out for me is that so we have these four main sections: foundations, components, patterns, and resources. And I was wondering like how it doesn't have its own entity, right? It's part of the foundations part. So just curious, like it's very extensive documentation on content, which I like. And in general, my very general analysis of their documentation is I will guess that this is an internal tool for them more than compared to other great websites that we all love. Like for instance, the Shopify Polaris documentation page is amazing. Is one of my favorites. A lot of work to come up with such an asset, but in here you can tell by the first because it's a zero height platform, so it's a already made platform, so they don't have to customize it. Second, because you can tell there's some blog pages for some components for the patterns, so you can tell that they are actually using it to internally document and make designers go to their documentation, and it's a work in progress tool, and you can tell. And also related to the content design, the difference on how extensive and how thorough the documentation is on content design, on motion, for instance, which it makes total sense for a company that moves people and things around. But for instance, on icons, it's very minimal. So is that a problem? No, I don't know. Maybe they didn't have the time to document it in the zero height space. They have it somewhere else. They are reworking it. And so you can tell, this is a living thing. And they actually use it to work. And something that I love is one of the videos, the audit looks like base, but not. So calling out their own, colleagues for not using components, and the cost of doing that, I think is really nice. And actually, the video has some post production, so they really care about that.
Love it. Yeah, this is really great insights. And I'm sure a lot of people will be inspired to take some interesting ways of working and just like pulling into their design systems. Great. Okay, the next thing is, as you can see, we discussed the base design system. And just a quick summary, they are using Zero Height for their main design system that connects all the different platforms. If you will go into a specific component, you will be able to see links to all the different platform-specific design systems. So one of them is the base web design system that is open. They also have iOS design system, Android, and it's locked behind the single sign-on authentication. So let's dive deeper into the web design system that they have. So this is like completely separate thing, but this is focused only for the web as a platform. It connects to the main design system documentation. So if you will go into a specific component, you will be able to see the link to the base web design system. So the only thing when I was like exploring, maybe that's more like a feature request, is to have related components. And I wish I could like go back easier to the main documentation from the base web design system, because within this web specific platform, they are not documenting everything because it's already documented on the main design system, right? So, but having a link back and take a look into all the guidelines will be really helpful. But I really love the way how they have this base web design system. Some interesting learnings here. They created this cheat sheet that helps you to quickly scan and understand all the things that are happening within the design system. They are using MDX files to generate all these documentations. And as you can see here, the web platform is not using Zero Height. It's a custom solution just for web here, but maybe I'm wrong. Again, we don't have full visibility into everything. It's just like outsider's perspective here. The thing that I was surprised about is the way how you can customize a lot of things within the components. So they have a specific parameter called overrides where you can pass a lot of different styles. And like I never seen that before. Some of the examples that I like is from Carbon design system where you can wrap everything into the layer component that helps you to set up the elevations and support some of the design tokens, design style variables inside. But those overrides are much more advanced and much more flexible. So this is like interesting thing from engineering perspective. And for some reason, they are using Ladle, not Storybook, to visualize all their components and see how those components are working. But looks like Ladle is coming from the Uber design system team. and they open sourced it. So if you would like to take a look into that, you can also try Ladle for instead of Storybook, but I believe Storybook is much more advanced here. And diving deeper into the Figma side of things. So we pulled here a couple screenshots from the Figma. Diana, would you like to share your thoughts on the Figma library that they have?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that obviously this is not the library they use to create their products. This is just like a demo of what they have. Still, I think it's pretty remarkable to see how they are trying to position their design system as one of the reference, presenting publicly what they have internally. And I appreciate that. So, yeah, clearly, this is a very basic UI kit. I would not say that this is a design system. But the fact that they took the time to create one for the public, for the Figma community, it's amazing. I think that companies should start thinking about it, right? Because it's not about sharing your secretive components or your secretive documentation. It's more about showing that you have subject matter experts in the team. And this is a huge strategy to not only be a reference in the design system industry, but also to attract talented people to their company.
Love it, love it. Thank you for sharing. And let's move to the components section. So here are some other highlights here. If you are coming from engineering background, they have their web-based documentation available on the GitHub, and they are using some interesting things as React View to visualize and test the components. And also there are top 3 articles from their blog. I really like the measuring design system at scale, how they created this measuring approach for mobile experiences. It's really hard to do that for the mobile. It's much easier to do that for the web, but it's just like a lot of interesting insights here. So if you will have a time to take a look into that, it will be great. And if you are coming from the design background, going into this deep dive into Uber design system video, it's a gold. You just need to spend some time. They are sharing a lot of interesting insights here. And if you are coming from operations and leadership, governance and design systems, this is the recent talk from Samira, Marcel, and Tali, where they spoke about the governance in design systems during this year config. Great, let's move to the next section. We have here design tokens and patterns. Let me quickly pull that into our board. I believe we will not spend too much time on the design tokens, but one second. Gonzalo, what do you think about the tokens within their documentation? Do you have any interesting practices that you would like to say for yourself?
I think one thing that caught my attention is that they put like tokens inside of foundations, not in the sense that it's inside, but it's also part of a bigger thing that they call foundations. So I think they save a problem in there. Sometimes some teams may name their design tokens foundations, and then all the other things you start putting in, but they're not part of design tokens, so it's hard for that. That was interesting. One thing that I was checking in was that they put the actual required properties for the tokens, so the name, type, value, description. I think that's, even though that's small, and so people might think that it's obvious, it's a win when you are trying to connect style dictionary formats between Figma and some other platforms. And in Figma, for example, you have to start filtering for the kind of value that you get, but if you get the type already set up as color or boolean, you can get the variables very quickly. It's way easier. Beside that, I think they make the whole thing about how they have token setup is that it makes completely sense. Like in this idea that they have primitive, semantic, and component, and they don't have much, I don't know, buzzwords or things that are not or that are unknown for the generic public that knows about design tokens. So in this case, they don't have specific names or they don't have like a weird layering of tokens. So it's just reading this stuff. It's kind of really easier to understand how they are assembled and what you will expect from each of these tokens. Yeah, I think those are small things that are very impactful. And when you start documenting design tokens, it saves you quite a lot of time.
Love it. Jeff, I know that you are coming from the engineering side of things. Do you have any interesting insights here?
Yeah, I love the adherence to the W3C spec. I mean, clearly, even the tiers, but things like the term composite tokens, that comes from the spec. And I think what we're seeing in the industry is tooling is kind of moving in that direction to be able to standardize based on some of the work by the W3C community group. I'm clearly a fan of design tokens. But yeah, it was really exciting to me as I was going through the documentation to encounter clearer understanding of the W3C spec implemented and then used as kind of the direction for how they are structuring and naming things. Because the more of that type of work that you do as a systems team, the easier it is going to be as tools move in that direction. So that was certainly exciting for me.
Love it. And you mentioned that the primitive or base tokens shouldn't be exposed to the users, customers of design systems, right? Can you elaborate on that, please?
Yeah. Sure. So this is my opinion. I've seen some variations of this, but in general, primitives or base tokens contain the value in the name. And if you're applying those directly in code or design, it limits what you can do from a theming perspective.
Mm-hmm.
It's, almost like hard coding inline styles or something, right? Anytime you're embedding something with like this example that we have in the Figma file, like primitives blue 600, like what if theming comes along someday and it's not blue anymore? Like it doesn't make sense to change the value of primitives blue 600 to something that's not blue, right? So if you're forward thinking and really considering if we are going to need to support theming in the future, even if it's not something that you're going to need to support today, using that semantic layer is a good starting point. And then we've even seen other opinions, the extreme opposite end. It was, I think, Dan Donald who wrote about this, using component tokens first, right? So you start with component tokens and then kind of work your way backward. So that's a completely opposite approach, but it's a different perspective of thinking about where you should start when using tokens. In my experience, component tokens can lead to a lot of variety. You can end up with thousands of tokens and it's a lot of maintenance. So yeah, that semantic layer should really be where most adopting teams live.
Love it. Yeah, that's a good point. We can move to the actual components right now. Let me pull some of the things right here. So as a part of the components, they have a lot of different components, and I really like the way how they structure and group things based on the term that I like to use, component family, instead of this is more higher level than the component groups and the components itself. So they have component families as inputs, speakers, state and time, content, navigation, tables, and others. And with our limited access to the actual understanding what kind of design system components are being in use, so here is a quick overview of their components that I was able to find. Again, I didn't spend so much time here, so I'm sure the adoption rate is much higher than we see so far right here. But this is a couple of screenshots from the main pages where you can see that they have the inputs, they have the buttons, and other components being used. Within my Uber account, I can see also the avatar component being used here, the cards, the site navigation, and on my trip information, I can also see the star rating component and also the progress steps that they have with some buttons used inside the page itself. So let's take a look into one specific component here. And let's dive deeper into tabs. So let's dive deeper into the documentation, how they are explaining the usage of the tab as a component. Tabs are a navigational element that allows users to easily move between groups of related content. And here are the two links to the base web design system and to the main global design system that they have on Zero Height. And here's a quick preview of how it looks. When we went through the product, let me pull a couple of the components that we were able to find. When it comes to tabs, there are two of them. The first one is the navigation tab and the new base motion tabs. So as you can see here, as a quick preview, this is the first insight. They have one tab that is deprecated. It's called tab. Jeff, please jump in here if you have interesting thoughts as well. I really like that they have this parameter that they are adding into the DOM structure itself as data, base web, and then the name of the component. So I believe they are already doing some measuring behind the scenes. So that's why they need to find a better way to tag actual design system components so that they will be able to measure the adoption per page within the actual product. So this kind of approach is being used by many others like Shopify, IBM, and this is like a easy way to find all your components in the product itself. Here is the one of the navigation tabs that I was able to find. This specific navigation tab is not using the base component yet, but maybe this is still work in progress. And this is the new base motion tab. As you can see here, they call it a little bit different as tab list and others. So this is the way how they can separate the new one versus the previous one. So Jeff, would you like to share your thoughts on how they are maybe moving into the new tab component? How right now within the product they have this preliminary stage in between where they are not using the design system yet, but they are trying to replicate it visually at least.
Yeah, no, I thought, my observation here was it looked like they were moving in a good direction from a semantic perspective. So it looks like they started with just a bunch of divs, and then somebody in product created this middle example, which is using anchors, and then the updated system component is using buttons. So I like to see that kind of progression and recognition of using semantic HTML to just have a really solid foundation. Those data attributes, you're right. Like, so that HTML attribute is just data and then blah, like whatever. And so they're using base web, and that is generally used as like a way to find components for testing or analytics, et cetera. The other observation that I had here is that, there's a lot of these kind of gobbledygook CSS classes. I saw that they're using Styletron, which has been around for quite a while, I think, it's a CSS and JS tool. And I'm assuming that these are kind of generated by something like Styletron. So it just felt like a little bit of bloat, but I would have to look a little bit more at it to see if all of these divs with all of these CSS classes are actually required.
And as we can see here for the tabs within the product, they didn't use the tab component actually. They used just buttons here. And when we see those kind of opportunity areas where product teams, when we have our own components, but the product teams are doing some deviations, maybe they are doing some A/B testing, maybe they are trying some new things. What are your reactions into that? Like when you see this kind of opportunities, are you trying to go and reach out to the actual product teams who try to create this new variation of the component, and instead of using our tab components, they started using buttons instead? Like, what is your process here and approach as overall? Like, are you actively reaching out to the product teams, or it's okay and like it's important to give some time to product teams to understand if things are working or not, and then maybe add it to the main design system as a guideline?
Oh, I can speak first. Well, first of all, this button looks identical as a tab. So I would assume that the product designers that were putting together were A/B testing, or B, they probably weren't aware that there was a tab component available in the design system, but I doubt it because tab component is a foundational piece of it's a foundational component. So I would doubt it. But it could be that they are testing if having both components that can achieve the same purpose is in a long term is an strategic approach, or they want to consolidate and simplify. So they are testing if buttons for tabs would be a really good approach. I am actually checking the tab page on the base design system, and they happen to have a video, of course. And in the video, they show how they are using a plugin to configure the tab, which is way more intuitive than using the Figma property panel that the product designers usually do. I would say that they did it as a testing.
Mm-hmm. Love it, love it. And Alberto, from like operations or leadership perspective, like what is your approach? Do you actively tracking all these deviations and then somehow reaching out maybe in like couple weeks or couple months to the product teams asking like, what are the results of this specific testing, for example, and are we ready to pull it into the design system? Or you are more focused on the proactive approach when you see this kind of deviations and you are taking the first steps to document this new variation within the component family and like try to connect the dots later?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think we will have more insights about this deviation on the patterns side, because I personally think that these are not considered patterns, more on maybe we get it a bit philosophical, right? Like, what is this? But probably this is part of a top navigation, and it's a collection of patterns that the user navigate from one place to another. Also, for me, tabs, but my personal perspective is that tabs don't take the user to other page, basically disclose or hides content, which they describe it that way. So that's for starters. And secondly, if there's a test related to a component, yeah, basically like at Vive or previously at Prezi, we don't normally test that much components per se, because components without context, you don't get a perfect insight. But we monitor tests that where these components or potential changes, like we have, consumers of XYZ component, a tab component that they believe they're having. Actually, I have a specific case about tabs. They believe that they're not working perfectly, and then they have, doubts. So they're going to test it as part of a bigger entity test. So what we do is to be connected to that team and include. Actually, that's a challenge. In general, I would say, how do you include insights from tests into the design system? So consumers, future consumers, can use the component or the pattern really informed, like making sure that, okay, this has been tested, so I don't have to, test it myself anymore. So yeah, that's how we approach testing in general for components.
Love it.
Yeah, this is a really good question, Fareed, and I just want to add a couple of things. So, if this team implemented tabs with icons, it could be for a few reasons. You need to go and actually talk to the team and ask, why did you deviate from the system component? It could be to experiment and test, as Diana mentioned, or it could just be the tabs component at the system level didn't support icons, and the team just went, we need to use icons and we can't use this thing, right? So you need to go and talk to them and figure out what was the reason behind deviating. After you've answered that, then it really gets into higher level things like, what's your contribution workflow? What is your team's internal workflow? What's your governance model? What questions are you asking the team to figure out if this variant of tabs should be included at the system level, or if it's just going to live at a product tier, right? Like, those are all higher level, operations level things that, we don't have time to talk about now, but that's where I would see this going potentially.
Love it.
Can I
Please.
add one last comment to that? Yeah, I think it's fun to start thinking about what are the reasons why one page of one thing is not using kind of stuff on the system. Even from the product that you work on, sometimes kind of hard to know why they're not using the thing. By experience, sometimes there's so many reasons. Like, it happens sometimes that one part of the product needs to use a third-party tool. So that third-party tool will have their own style sometimes. For some reason, you cannot control that. Or you will have content being injected from the backend, so the texts are not going to have the same text, styles and such. So any of those things, I think, kind of escape to the reach of the system or the team sometimes. But if you're able to find like the reason or the team that doesn't have or is not using the right tab in this case, I think there's always valuable to go with a plan, like some sort of a migration idea. So you're here, it would be nice to be in this other stage, and we're going to help you to go through that, and not just try to, I don't know, mandate them to move the thing and start using our tabs because our tabs are cooler. Yeah, I think that's kind of the thing that works for us at least.
Love it, love it, love it. Yeah, love the migration plan and all these discussions. I really like the idea from Denmol is the current design systems are lacking the presentation of how the components are actually being used in the product, right? So if there could be a section where they could just visualize similar to the ones that we are discussing here, like usage within the product with all the different deviations or variations, and just saying that maybe they didn't use tabs here because it's more like a navigational buttons, right? Maybe they have some performance issues with the very complex tab component, and they would like to make sure that this core component available on the core pages loads super fast or something. So this kind of examples here within the product would be great to see, similar to the ones that we are sharing here, with some decisions talk, right? Explaining why it's okay to use buttons instead of in this specific scenario. And I really love the discussions around the migration plan.
I would like to add something. In our company, sometimes we find that our product designers overlook a variant that, for example, Tab already supports an icon, but because of the default variant that is presented when they drag and drop into their Figma canvas, it doesn't show that. Although they can find it through the Figma property panel. So one of our members had this amazing idea of creating a page for recipes where a lot of different variants are configured and explained. So with this recipe, the product designers can just copy and paste configured components with specific properties, turn on and off for them to use as a baseline. So that's another thing, providing more visibilities to all the variants.
Love it. Yeah. I don't remember, but we had Inspect and Reflect. I believe it was no, they have copy and paste like something similar, Diana, to the thing that you mentioned within the Figma as well, so that people could not just copy the component, but they can copy it with specific settings, configurations defined already, so that they could see all these variations. This is really good. Jeff, you added one note here. Do you want to elaborate?
Sure. Yeah. This is probably one of the best examples that I've come across in terms of a doc site that is demonstrating that concept that you just mentioned, which is really showing the system assets up front in, so what you're sharing on screen right now, right? Like here's how our system components look when they're used across a whole variety of devices, right? And so they have that front and center right at the start of their documentation, but then also on individual component pages, they don't start with like, here's the spec and here's the design thinking behind it, because they recognize that like adopting teams don't really care as much about some of that stuff. It's nice to have if they really want to drill down and understand some of it, but their number one priority is getting their job done and coming to the doc site to grab whatever they need to make their job faster. And so showing how the thing is actually used can, I think, aid adopting teams from that perspective substantially. And so, yeah, that's just a great reference.
Love it. They have some examples on their main documentation website, not on the base web. Yeah, so that's like how things can be connected as well. But like maybe having more comments here or insights on why specifically, what kind of decisions were made. For example, it will be better to use buttons instead of tabs. That might be something interesting. They also have do's and don'ts. Maybe that's the place where you can connect all your decisions within the documentation itself. Great. I know that we don't have much time. Let me just pull a couple others. I really like this header navigation. Let me pull it up here into the board. So as you can see here, let me just show you where exactly the header navigation is being used. So for header navigation, they have multiple places, right? And this is a good example of template when we talk about the atomic design, right? Because all their navigations are unified across different product lines. As main Uber website, also a similar component is being used within other places. Let me show this example. This example is coming from the Uber Drive website. So as you can see here, it's a little bit different style. And let me show another variation of the header navigation for Uber for Business. So we can see that some of the things are reusable. Let me just pull them right here. So what do you think about having those template specific components? Do you have that within your design systems? Do you have some learnings about like creating unified templates across multiple products? Who would like to go first on that part?
I think I can go. Absolutely. It's a way to ensure coherence. It's a way to ensure that the right tokens are implemented in the right place. But in general, it's about composite tokens, or how strict you are, how flexible you are, giving them access to primitives or giving them the flexibility to radiate with radiate tokens. So in my opinion, templates is a way to ensure, bigger entity patterns are covered and they are coherent across different channels or platforms or products. However, they are all using, the same nested components, but you're giving them the flexibility of why do I need the search bar if we don't need that necessity in this particular product? So definitely it's something that I work on almost daily. I worked in previous companies, so yeah.
Love it. And thank you, Diana, for
Uh,
pulling another component here.
And Fareed, at Aperture, we're calling them recipes. They live in the same Storybook instance, but they are not using the technology that we're using to build components. They are simply HTML, and then in product, they're using Tailwind, and they have a Tailwind config that maps our design tokens to some of the Tailwind utility classes. And so we've mimicked that. We have like a masthead recipe and then a footer recipe. So it's literally showing them, here's how you could do this in product. And then, there's the potential for those recipes to be promoted to a component in the future, but we didn't go overboard by making them components from the start, just because when you start to get into larger patterns on the code side, they can get complex very quickly. Like Nathan Curtis talks a lot about like subcomponents and how do you structure all of these things so that they actually make sense, they work, and then they are future proof. And so that's how we've approached it. We've started with just HTML and Tailwind because that's what product is using, and they can literally just come copy and paste and go on their way.
Love it. Yeah, this is great. Like we discussed so many things. Let me just pull other component families that we wanted to discuss but didn't have enough time. If you are interested in seeing all their components that they are using within the product, feel free to go into the events page. There is a link to the community board itself. And if you click on this link and click on this open community board, you will be able to see all the things that we've tagged so far and see where and how they are being used. And yeah, this will help you to understand the different variations of similar components that people are using, and you can tag more there as well. And we had some really good discussions today. Thank you very much, Jeff, with Alberta, joining the session. It was really fun. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for it. This was really fun.
Yeah, thank you for coming.
Everyone.
Thank you.